Ms. Goodman, is this your bill? Okay.
Senate Bill 480, Child Care Stabilization Grant Program and Child Care Expansion Grant Program established. I'm not going to take a long time explaining the bill as drafted, and you'll see why in a second, but this bill strikes the bill as drafted, which would have created an ongoing Child Care Stabilization Grant Program in the Maryland State Department of Education, and substitutes authority for MSDE to administer a child care stabilization grants in fiscal years 2022 and 2023 to provide financial support to child care providers that have faced a financial hardship or suffered operational burden during the COVID-19 pandemic. The bill sets forth criteria for prioritizing child care provider applications, and there is $50 million available for the grant program. On your desk is a reprint of the bill as amended by the Budget and Tax Committee, and it was passed unanimously yesterday.
As you can see, the whole bill has been excised, and the new, is this uncodified?
Yes.
The new language is all uncodified, guaranteeing the money, which, as we know, B&T has the purse strings. So the question for us is policy, whether we agree with the bill as amended or not. Let's put it on the floor in front of us, entertain a motion. It's been moved. Is there a second? It's been seconded. Discussion on the bill as amended. Senator.
Yeah, so this is, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Senate Bill 480, right? Yeah, okay. So everything is crossed out. So what's left?
So
Just,
what they did is they crossed out an ongoing program by putting it in statute and replaced it with just a 2-year program. So they can fund these grants during fiscal years 2022 and 2023 using the criteria set forth in the uncodified language on page 4.
okay, on page 4.
The very back page.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're saying this is not a new grant program? This is,
Well, it's a new grant program, but it's only temporary. It's just for these fiscal years.
okay. Okay, great, thank you.
Senator, to give them breathing space after the COVID, a lot of them were hit hard. Further discussion? Senator Washington.
I support the bill as amended. I just had a question about the administration. It seemed what was struck also was telling the department that they had to do all these things. For example, on page 3, line 19, telling them that they had to develop all of this. So I guess, again, that just would be unnecessary, or would they need to develop regulations about how, I guess I'm asking, shouldn't there be regulations about how to administer the grants? Because we don't know how they're being allocated.
Well, I think part of the problem with requiring a huge amount of regulations is that the program is temporary. I mean, it's
Right.
only for fiscal years 2022, 2023. So by the time regulations were adopted, the program would be done.
But are there any rules at all about
Right,
how
and subsection B, starting
Thank you.
on
Okay.
page 4 there. In awarding grants under this section,
Right.
the department shall give preference to child care providers based on the following criteria in order of priority. So they do
Okay.
give some guidance as to how they should prioritize the grant money.
Okay. But there are no limits in the amount that any one provider can receive, because that also seems to be something that is stipulated, because we don't want the problems that have happened in past with some of these grant programs is the larger entities come in and take up the majority of the funds. So I guess from a policy, I just wondered, was there any consideration, or should we think about some maximum grant?
Previously,
Yeah.
on look on page 4, lines 1 through 4.
Right.
It did have some limits in there.
Yeah, yeah. So, Mr. Chair, I'm inclined to look at that. I think that's protecting and making sure that there is enough to spread around. If 50,000 isn't if that's not sufficient, perhaps someone, I don't see anything that requires them that they couldn't go back. But I feel like there should be some
Senator,
path. Yeah.
the only thing I would point out
Yeah,
is on page 4, under B, if you look at provision 1, 4, and 5, I think indirectly, there are some frames that might help that. But,
Okay.
look,
do we have any reporting? Maybe we could look at it at the end of the first year. Is there a report, could we add a reporting requirement?
we could, Senator, but it's only a 2-year program. It sunsets in
Well,
2 years. I'm not sure we're going to be able to change between
Yeah.
1 year and 2. And again, look, even though we're second, if we want to offer an amendment,
Okay.
we're open. It would slow things down, but we can entertain an amendment, seriously.
Yeah. That's okay. I didn't know it was this changed, so I didn't really have a chance to formulate a
Well,
good amendment. So
And
I'll
look,
think
it's
about
not,
it.
we shouldn't worry about crossover. We are second on the policy side.
Yeah, yep.
I'll come back to you, Senator. Senator Simon Ayer, followed by Senator Hester.
Yeah, I mean, crossover's done, so, and we've missed that boat. But I do agree with Senator Washington about the limit. I'd hate to see one group come in and get a huge amount and take it off the table for the other because it's limited money. But the other thing, I'm just curious, on A, it says, the purposes of this grant is to help those who have been suffering in the past 2 years during COVID, but all the criteria is pretty much forward-looking type of, like one says, they'll be closing in the next 12 months. So it really doesn't take in any consideration what happened during COVID. It's just, we are where we are today, and now we're going to say, well, if you're going to close in the next 12 months, then you qualify. It doesn't give any consideration to the hardship they went through, which seems to be the purpose of the,
Well, I think it does, in the sense it's called a stabilization grant, meaning that the hardships they've suffered and they've managed to survive, but probably just barely, and this is the way that they're going to survive in the next 12 months, is they're saying, they're looking at their finances and saying, we really need some help to stay open, and this would give them the opportunity. So,
I think that's right, Senator. I think some have closed. They couldn't make it through the 2 years. Some are still trying to hold on and tread water. So I think that's the ones that still have they still have hardship. They haven't gotten over the hump yet. So I think the implication is the ones that have been hardest hit are still operating. But
Okay,
again, that doesn't negate.
somebody could have opened 2 months ago and qualify for this, right?
but it says the first priority is providers that have demonstrated financial hardship that poses significant risk of closing within the next 12 months. If you opened 2 months ago, I mean, the whole point of this is to get more slots open. So even if people have opened 2 months ago and they're fulfilling the need in maybe an area that didn't have them before, and this gets them to stay open, then that fulfills the purpose of the grant, which is more daycare slots for more children.
No, and I get that, but that's not what it says. It says, this grant is set up for those who have faced financial hardship and suffered during COVID. I could open up a childcare 2 months ago and qualify. There's nothing in here that said I couldn't qualify, and it had nothing to do with the pandemic. And then, so these are priority-based, right? So you have to, if you meet the first one, you get the grant. If you don't meet that, then how's that work?
Senator, yes, it is priority, and it is by the department. But I think the department, when they say they see that the first criteria is providers that have demonstrated financial hardship, someone opens 2 months ago, and just because they don't have a good financial plan, they're applying. As much as I might have some disagreement with the department, I think they're going to be pretty responsible and not give it to some newbie on the block when the purpose is pretty clear. And they got to come up next year in front of B&T on their budget, so.
Okay.
But again, if we want to be more explicit, we can.
Well, let me just ask one more question. The Child Care Scholarship Program, is that the new thing under Kerwin, where they're opening up positions?
No, that's the bill that, SB 920, that we considered the other day and voted on. That's that is called the Child Care Scholarship Program that provides the subsidy to families, and they made it preemptive, the preemptive eligibility.
Okay. Yeah, that's the word. I would still feel more comfortable putting a limit on it, like when it came in, opposed to giving somebody huge and other people not getting, because it's not unlimited money, right?
It's $50 million for those
2
two
years.
fiscal years, yes.
Do we have any idea how much they anticipate need? I mean, how'd they come up with the 50 million? Is it based on how many schools or daycares they had, and they figured that this would give 10,000 to each, or basically, where'd 25 million a year come up?
I don't know.
Senator,
I'm looking.
while she's looking, I mean, on number one, if you wanted, we could put in language that said that's been in business for at least 12 months. I mean, if you're worried about the Johnny-come-latelys,
No, I can leave that discretion to the department. I mean, I'm looking more that they can give 200,000
Yeah.
to one and run out of money
I-
quickly.
For me, I just don't know if 50 or 100 or 150,000, if they have 30 kids or 50 kids or whatever. I just don't know what that cap, I mean, we could set a floor, obviously. I just don't know. I mean, I don't know if the range they had in the original bill was right either. I just don't know what that would be.
Yeah, I think the original bill had 50,000 cap.
I understand. I just don't know how relevant that, if the
Yeah,
right
and that's
number
why
or
I
not.
asked council how they came up with 25 million a year.
So if you look at the fiscal note on page 3, it said the Federal American Rescue Plan Act distributed over $500 million in federal funds to Maryland, in part to pass through providers and short-term stabilization grants and invest in long-term solutions for the child care system. This includes approximately $309 million targeted for child care stabilization grants. Further, a proposed fiscal 2022 deficiency appropriation would supplement the federal grants by an additional $50 million in general funds. So there's most of this is federal, and then the state came in and added more money.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I think what we're going to do is revisit this. I don't want to hold hearings much longer. I thought it would be shorter. And again, they're very, very important questions that everyone's raising. And again, if we can improve the bill, we should do that. So we'll take it up. Into the mic, please, Senator.
I looked at the House cross file, and it has the exact same amendments.
Well,
So,
and again, that shouldn't deter us from taking any initiative. So we will take it up at the end of today's hearings. So we'll put that aside. That's a hold. And for the audience, we have a number of committee members whose seats might be empty, but they are providing testimony on their bills in the House of Delegates today. We have crossover. Bills are being heard, so people will be coming and going. It does not mean their lack of interest or initiative. And I'm fighting a cold, that's why I'm wearing the mask. So with that, let's start with, we'll move into hearings. We're streaming, we're good? Yes. Okay, we're going to move to HB 882, Natural Resources, Pocomoke River Wildland, Alteration of Boundaries. We have with us the Secretary of Natural Resources, Secretary Hadaway Riccio. Welcome, Madam Secretary.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon to you. Good afternoon, members of the committee. For the record, Jeannie Hadaway Riccio, Secretary of the Maryland Department of Natural Resources, and With me today is Bunky Leffman, our Legislative Director. I want to thank you for the opportunity to testify on House Bill 882, which would add approximately 80 acres to our state wildland system and provide a unique opportunity for outdoor recreation. As this committee is probably familiar, a state wildland is a special protected area that overlays all or part of a state park, a forest, or a wildlife management area owned by our department. Any modifications to those state wildlands, including adding additional lands, requires the approval of the Maryland General Assembly. So we're proposing to add some recently acquired property that equates to approximately 80 acres as part of our Pocomoke State Forest, and exempt approximately 2 acres to allow for construction of an elevated walkway trail that would connect the town of Snow Hill to Pocomoke State Park. The location for the new public access trail was determined in part by the existence of existing old logging roads that span about half the length of the trail. And the proposed location is also at the outermost boundary of the property to minimize any impacts. Both the Maryland Outdoor Recreation Economic Commission and the State Park Investment Commission have recommended that we do projects that connect our communities and enhance opportunities for outdoor recreation while preserving our natural resources. And this project is a great example of all of those things being achieved, in that it would connect Snow Hill to Pocomoke City and provide some really significant social, recreational, and economic benefits. As you have probably noted from the letters that you've received, we have several nonprofits and elected officials that are in support of the project statewide. And with that, we thank you and request your favorable report, and we're happy to answer any questions the committee may have.
Thank you. There is no opposition. Madam Secretary, you had us at hello. Do you want to speak at all, or you're just for questions?
Yeah, just for questions.
Okay, Mr. Leffman. Questions on 882? Brief one from Senator from the Eastern Shore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Madam Secretary, Mr. Leffman, thank you for your work on this. It is a very impressive list of community organizations that are supporting this project. My question is the timeline as far as moving forward. So this is part of the Worcester County, the southern part, where we really have been trying to do more in the area of opportunities for both our residents and our visitors. So I'm anxious to see what the timeline looks like.
So I think a conservative estimate would be 3 years to completion. But, assuming that we can get approval from the General Assembly, I think that we can start with design, the A&E design, within probably 6 months or so. And we would look forward to working with the community and, of course, our local representatives as we go through that planning process.
Thanks for all the hard work on this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Ms. Luffman. That
Thank
concludes
you.
the hearing on 882. Let's go to HB 75, Delegate Frazier Hidalgo. This is Maryland Agriculture Commission, the hemp industry member. Again, there is no opposition. Delegate, welcome.
I know that doesn't mean a whole lot to you, but this is the first time in 3 years that I've been before a committee to testify in person, and it's the first time I've taken my, that's like, yeah, I can't even tell you. Wow. God, look at all these faces. Oh, my God. Look at mine. For the record, Maryland State Delegate David Frazier Hidalgo here to present House Bill 75. I think this bill has been before you before. It's a pretty simple bill, as most of you know, because a lot of it's come through your committee. The hemp industry, we really have, over the last 6 or 7 years, really worked hard to get the hemp industry up and running in the state of Maryland. We've had a lot of luck. Currently, we have 98 registered farmers farming over 1,200 acres of industrial hemp. This is a $1 billion industry, and I've been doing, and with our partners here in the House and in the Senate, have been doing everything we can to give our agricultural community as well as our businesses every chance they can to diversify their crop and to make money. So with that said, there is a 30-member Maryland Agricultural Commission that advises the governor and the General Assembly on a regular basis. And all this bill does is add one member that is specifically from the hemp industry that can advise specifically on hemp-related issues when it comes to soils, when it comes to growth, when it comes to product development. that kind of thing. So that's all it is. It just adds one simple member. It's a quick vote for you all, so I appreciate it. Any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Senator Ellis, a very brief question about the makeup of the committee.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to ask the delegate a question. Are the other members of the Maryland Agricultural Commission industry-specific?
Yeah, so if you look at page 3 of the bill, it actually outlines every single member. And I can go through them if you
No,
want.
just so you-
Dairy, poultry, livestock, tobacco, nurseries, horticulture, field crops, vegetable, veterinarian, Maryland State Grange, Maryland Farm Bureau, nominees from the House, nominees from the Senate, nominees from the food processing industry, nominees appointed from large general public, the consumer member, members representing, or the organic farming industry, representing direct farming markets, nominees representing viticulture, representing agricultural education in primary and secondary schools, representing agro-businesses, representing forestry industry, representing aquaculture, representing agro-tourism, representing the bio industry, and at least 2 represent, and the bill has members
Okay.
represented from the hemp industry. It actually adds 2, so.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That was easy. Thank you, Senator. Okay, seeing no further questions, that concludes the hearing on HB 75. Thank you,
Thank you.
Delegate.
I have one more bill. Do you want me to hold or step away?
Which one is that, Delegate?
HB 485?
Oh, the delegation. Hold on. No, that's fine, please.
Thank
go
you.
on.
Thank you, Ms.
Delegate Stein, you'll be next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Again, it's so wonderful to see your happy, smiling faces. I hope you think the same of mine. So I'm here to present a local Montgomery County bill, HB 485. This is a Sunday deer hunting bill, but I want to stress to the committee that what makes this different than any other deer hunting bill, or most deer hunting bills you've probably heard, is that you passed this back in 2017 with a sunset on it. And the part of the bill that makes it unique is it allows Sunday hunting simply until 10:30 in the morning on specific hunting days. After 10:30 in the morning, the compromise that was reached with the agricultural community and the equestrian community was that they can hunt on Sundays in Montgomery County because we have such a massive deer population problem that's doing a lot of damage to agriculture. But the compromise that was made was at 10:30, you're out. Everybody else can use the lands. So all this does is eliminate the sunset because it has been very, very successful pilot program in MoCo. So again, all it does is remove the sunset and allow everybody to continue doing what they all agree to and they all love to do, and protect agriculture and everything else that goes along with deer overpopulation problems, which I'm sure this committee knows much about.
Particularly about property borders when hunting.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. We get it all.
Senator Freihester.
Thank you very much. Delegate, it's great to see your face, too.
Oh, thank you.
My question is this is a local bill. Do you have a local letter?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
thank
Seeing
you.
no further questions, you're dismissed. Thank you for joining us, Delegate.
Thank you very much for having me.
Delegate Stein, Vice Chairman of ENT, welcome. Oh, you've got plenty of witnesses. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let's have, we had the current Secretary of DNR, now we have the former Secretary of Natural Resources, John Griffin. Please join us, John, at the desk. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll also have Jill Swearingen, Harry Huntley, and Joe Hinson. If there are not enough chairs, please come to the first row. Oh, I'm sorry, Joe Hinson is in opposition. Don't come to the first row. Until we get to you, we'll take the proponents first, then take questions, then move to the opposition. Delegate Stein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members.
This is Bill 784, committee members.
It's nice to be back. This legislation would establish the Irreplaceable Natural Areas Program. It would help protect the critical habitat of Maryland's rarest species, but only on lands that are owned by DNR. Now, the extinction of animal and plant species that we hear so much about is happening not just overseas, but it's happening here in Maryland. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is in the final stages of review to declare the Maryland darter extinct. And so failing to protect our unique habitats will result in more loss of biodiversity. So that's why this bill focuses on the protection of the habitat of species. DNR currently has the regulatory authority to protect threatened, endangered species, but not their habitats. So this bill would protect what are called irreplaceable natural areas, the last few biologically unique areas where threatened and endangered species still hang on. The bill requires DNR to designate these areas by mid-2023, including maps of each, unique features, and threats to each and compatible uses. So with that, I urge a favorable report.
All right, thank you. Mr. Henson.
Thank you. Good afternoon, committee members. John Griffin.
Oh, Mr. Griffin, sorry.
I'm the program manager for what's called the Chesapeake Conservation Partnership. I was pleased to work with Delegate Stein on this bill. It makes a step forward in terms of further protection for what are called Tier 1 and 2 threatened and endangered species. And as Delegate Stein mentioned, many conservation biologists around the world concerned about the predicted sixth extinction of species attribute habitat loss as the overriding cause, followed by invasive species and then other considerations. So I will just leave you briefly with a quote from Dr. Thomas Lovejoy, who's sadly in December passed away. He lived in McLean, Virginia, but he's a world-renowned conservation biologist, and he actually coined the term biological diversity. But he emphasized the importance of conserving the habitat of rare species as critical to arresting species decline. Like Delegate Stein, I would urge favorable consideration of this legislation. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Looks like Senator Riley has a question.
Thank you very much. Delegate, will this report of the identified properties come back to the legislature for review?
Yes.
Pull that microphone close, please.
The legislature would receive the report
Very good.
of these areas.
And would we have to approve them, or is the DNR the approving organization?
DNR is.
When these properties are approved, will they restrict things like access, development, taking out natural resources like timber, minerals, and things of that nature?
Well, the bill as drafted says that, among other things, DNR would have to designate what are compatible uses for these areas. So it's possible that there are some current uses in these areas which would be restricted.
But again, we're delegating it to the department.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, any other questions? I see Senator Ellis, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for this bill, Delegate Stein. In your testimony, you mentioned Maryland darter. Did I hear you correctly?
The darter.
Darter?
Yes.
And what's that?
It's a small fish. It's, I think, maybe maximum about 5 inches or so. At most. It's the only vertebrate animal unique to Maryland, and it's basically extinct.
When you say basically, either it is or it is.
Well,
so it doesn't mean it's gone forever. So are any still exist?
Well, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is in the final stages of its review to declare it extinct. So I guess when I say basically, it's like it hasn't made the official final proclamation, but it's in the final stages of review to make that determination.
So there are no more out there we can protect and save? Is that what
As far as we know.
Wow, okay, great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and Senator Hester, go ahead.
Thank you. I just wondered if there were any amendments that have been offered that address some of the concerns from DNR. Have you seen their fiscal note? Or their letter, their letter of information? They ask, state forests are already required to protect rare species through dual certification for sustainable forestry as required, blah, 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 and additional regulation could set up conflicts between that and the requirements of the two certifying bodies. Does that make any sense at all?
Yeah. What DNR is referring to there is sustainable forest certifications, which we now have on most of our state forest lands. But we don't see this as being incompatible. It's actually adding another layer of protection in those areas, in those forests that are duly certified. And this is something that has to be worked out in the department between the heritage staff who identify and try to protect these species and the managing units, for example, parks or wildlife management areas. And it is true that we do have these dual certifications, but not on all state forest land. So I don't think that, personally, that's an issue. It's an issue that can be worked through and resolved.
Yeah, I would assume that during the mapping and the reporting phase, that would come up and could be noted and those resolved, correct?
Yes, sure.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
All right, seeing no further questions for this panel, thank you, Delegate Stein. Thank you, Mr. Ruff.
Thank you, Senator. Members.
I think next we have Ms. Jill Swearingen from the Maryland Native Plant Society and Mr. Harry Huntley from Chesapeake Conservancy. If you're here.
Good
All
afternoon.
right, go ahead, you have 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I'm Jill Swearingen. I'm an ecologist. I've been working on native species and invasive species for 3 decades, or more than 3 decades. I'm here today on behalf of the Maryland Native Plant Society in support of this bill to establish an irreplaceable natural areas program in the DNR for the purpose of preserving Maryland's native biodiversity on state-owned land managed by the department. This important and far-sighted legislation supports MNPS's mission, which is to promote awareness, appreciation, and conservation of Maryland's native plants and their habitats through education, research, advocacy, and service activities. Maryland's ecosystems and native plant communities are under siege from development-related habitat destruction, invasive species, climate change, overabundant white-tailed deer populations, heavy and increasing human recreational use, and insufficient management and restoration of those resources. These impacts have resulted in major changes to Maryland's biodiversity over the past century, including increasing numbers of native species becoming rare, threatened, and endangered, and some extinct. According to Vascular Plants of Maryland, a comprehensive account of the state's biodiversity, there are 2,918 vascular plants with 2,094 of those that are native. Of those, 737, or 35%, are tracked by Maryland Natural Heritage Program due to concerns about existing and potential threats to their survival. And some are non-native species too. Native plants sustain native animals. They're the basis of the food web and require sufficient high-quality habitat in order to thrive. Native plants and animals have co-evolved over long periods of time and depend on each other. In addition to the many environmental services that native plants provide, they serve as essential larval food for caterpillars that feed Maryland's native birds and other wildlife. I appreciate the chance to speak today, and we do look forward to a favorable report on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you, Ms. Swearingen.
Okay, thank you.
And we have one person testifying in opposition that's signed up, and this is Mr. Joe Hinson from Maryland Forests.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Hinson, you have
I'm
2
Joe
minutes.
Hinson. I'm a consultant forester in Salisbury, Maryland. I'm also president of the Maryland Forestry Association. This bill would require DNR to develop regulations that would identify and specify the management of what we might generally describe as special areas on state lands. We support that goal. We're very interested ourselves in protecting special areas, but we do have some objections to the means as presented by this bill, and we must oppose it. First of all, it's redundant. Each state forest is managed according to a comprehensive plan that identifies ecologically significant areas and specifies the management that's necessary to protect those ecological values. Then each year, there's an annual work plan that implements the master plan, and public review is actively sought on both levels of planning. The process has resulted in 72,000 acres of the 217,000 acres of state forest lands being totally off limits to timber harvest. Second, the bill is based on subjective terms. Biodiversity, irreplaceable natural areas, unique natural communities, et cetera, pristine examples of a native ecological type. Those terms are often in the eye of the beholder. And debates over those is sort of a hallmark of controversies over public land management across the country. I spent a lot of my career in Idaho representing the timber industry there, and it was a constant battle between the industry dependent upon national forest timber and those that opposed logging, much of which centered around interpretation of terms such as these. When you
Mr.
put it
Henson,
in law,
can you wrap up?
yes, it becomes litigible, and there will be lawsuits over the adequacy and accuracy of the process by which these areas are designated.
Thank you.
So it adds to the controversy.
All right, thank you. I see that Senator Carrezza has a question for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Hinson, for your testimony. And I see that you did outline three main reasons with the bill being redundant and the terminology that, could be, which would be subjective.
Yes,
But
ma'am.
the third point that I wanted to ask about is, it seems there's a trust issue on, when you go through this process. And I wanted to understand a little bit more this organization that can kind of balance the different issues that are being brought before it. You mentioned two third-party organizations.
Right. Each national forest is mandated to be certified by both the Sustainable Forestry Council and the Forest Stewardship Council. Those are two third-party organizations. They visit portions of each state forest, I believe every year, with teams of specialist scientists and natural resource professionals. It's an intensive several-day process where they review how the state forests are managed, the management plans, the objectives, and then they go out on the ground to make sure that their standards are being met. And one of their standards is to identify ecologically significant areas and species that are either endangered, threatened, or otherwise rare, and protect those.
So is your point that those two organizations are already doing this?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Senator Hester, you have a question. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. I was just curious, in terms of the forest management that's done now, are you or is it somebody else who's in charge of like the controlled management for fire hazard purposes? Is that your industry or is that a different department in DNR?
Well, I'm a private consultant, but DNR manages fire hazards.
Okay.
And often they do that by thinning overly dense stands and removing some of the fuel loads, often through logging.
Vote. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, seeing no further questions, Senator Carrezza, you don't have a question, right? Your light is still on. Senator Carrezza? Okay. All right, seeing no further questions at this point, that wraps up the hearing for House Bill 784. Thank you.
And and thank you for the opportunity to eat a little bit of lunch after my House bill hearing. Next up, we have House Bill 1110 with Delegate Holmes, Environment, Lead Poisoning Prevention, Elevated Blood Level. And with Delegate Holmes is going to be Tyler Abbott from the Maryland Department of the Environment and Deputy Secretary Horacio Tablada from also Maryland Department of the Environment. Welcome, Delegate Holmes. Nice to see you again.
Thank you so very much for allowing me to speak to you today on this very important bill. Before you is HB 1110. And the bill simply allows us in the state of Maryland to conform our case management studies to the federal requirements of CDC when CDC lowered their blood levels requirements from 5 micrograms per deciliter down to 3.5. We in the state of Maryland should have to mirror what the CDC had done in them lowering their blood level values. I recall when I first became a member of the House of Delegates, the established blood level was at 15 micrograms per deciliter. And it went down from 15 to 10 to 5, and now it's at 3.5. We all understand that any lead in a child is dangerous, but at least we're moving in the right direction, and we're moving in the right direction, I think, very significantly. So all this bill does is it puts Maryland in compliance with CDC in terms of the case management for blood levels that are tested when children test at 3.5, and that's all that it does. Also, the bill, it says that moving forward after 2024, I will no longer have to come before you and ask for another revision to the bill because it gets put on autopilot after that. So you won't have to see me again. Don't look so happy.
And with or without a bill, Delegate, and I see that it passed both committee and the full House unanimously.
That is correct.
Good work. I see no questions of my colleagues, from my colleagues. Is MDE going to testify? I see that you're here. You all can come forward. Delegate, you can stay where you are, or you can shift over one, whatever is your preference.
I'm going to make room for them.
Perfect. All right. Looks like we've got 3. I have 2 that are signed up.
I'm going to let Kaylee testify on my behalf because I think that might have got mixed up when I was submitting the.
Okay. Kaylee, Laliker? Laliker, sorry. Okay. You may go in either order, but it's nice
Sure.
to have you both here. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for allowing us to be here today. And my name is Horacio Tablada, I'm Deputy Secretary for the Maryland Department of the Environment. I'm here in support of House Bill 1110. As many of you know, since 1994, the state of Maryland as a whole has been fighting against lead poisoning in the children. We have been very successful over the years, seeing 98% decline since 1994. Many bills have gone through the years that have strengthened the law, and we appreciate the support of this committee and other committees and the whole General Assembly and everyone. So we believe that the House Bill 1110 will allow MDE to work with some local partners, the local health departments, to help us to build up capacity to address the lower levels that Delegate just mentioned, going from 5 to 3.5. Those are very low levels now, and it requires a lot of risk assessors, and that takes time to build a capacity. So with that, I'm going to let Ms. Laliker to explain more in detail the part of the bill.
To EHE, we're glad to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, I'm Kaylee Laliker. I'm the Director of the Land and Materials Administration at Maryland Department of the Environment. So under this bill, starting in October of this year, MDE would start notifying parents and property owners whenever there's a child diagnosed with a blood lead level that's at or above 3.5 micrograms per deciliter. And then between now and the end of 2022, we would work with stakeholders to study the most effective way of incorporating that lower level into the rest of the state's lead programs, including environmental investigations. And then starting January 1, 2024, we would start environmental investigations at the lower level. It's important that we have sufficient time to plan and build capacity for environmental investigations. An environmental investigation is a comprehensive evaluation of all the potential lead hazards in a child's environment, and it's performed in the home by an accredited risk assessor. And that accreditation requires over a year of training and experience, so it takes time to scale up that capacity. Also, lowering the blood lead level to 3.5 would result in an estimated 800 to 1,100 additional cases per year in Maryland that would require investigations. And just for comparison, that's about 3 times the number of cases that we handled in 2020. House Bill 1110 would allow MDE time to work with our partners on a plan to most effectively respond to those cases. So we request a favorable report on House Bill 1110. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to channel the chair here because he would give a special shout out to the Maryland Department of the Environment for actually showing up with an opinion and testimony that can help us and not just offering info. I have a quick question for Delegate Holmes. I see that Ruth Ann Norton, who has put decades into lead paint and this work, filed favorable with amendments, and I wonder whether the House looked at her amendments and stuff because she's still in as favorable with amendments and not just favorable. And if you need to check on that and get back to us.
Yes, yes,
If you want to do that.
can do that.
Yeah, I'd love to know about that.
Okay.
Senator Ellis, you have a question?
Thank you, Senator Kagan. And, Delegate Holmes, thank you for this bill. Quick question. We were talking about lead levels, and if we focus on lead levels in children, so I know we took care of lead paint and we took care of lead and fuels. So what would you say are the primary source of lead now that children might be affected by?
I would take that. Primarily still lead paint. Dust is the primary source.
You said dust?
Yeah, that from paint, chipping, peeling, flaking paint. However, as we get down to the lower levels, we're starting to see other sources, like could be cosmetics, could be in the food, it could be in the water, but we also have addressed, the General Assembly has addressed letting water in the public schools. So we're coming from all the angles, and that will help us. The risk assessors are very detailed. They spend almost the whole day in the homes and investigating what might be the source. If the paint's not the obvious, then they pursue some more the soils outside. So all those things help us get, but still the primary for the levels that are above is the paint.
Okay, so it's pretty much old paint that might be.
Yeah, prior to 1978, the paint contained lead in the United States.
Okay, and then old lead-based pipes that are still.
That would be from the water, the leaking lead from the water. On
Yeah,
South Salisbury.
Yeah. Do we have those still around, or we took care of that, especially in the
Well,
schools?
In the schools, that's another bill, another part that the department's working on.
I'm sorry, say that again?
The lead in school, the water in schools is something, that's another legislation that was passed a couple of years ago. And the department is working on that end. And also with the federal infrastructure bill that was passed, it will help us a lot to replace any remaining pipes that had lead in it.
Okay, great, thanks. Good to hear that. And you said lead in soil?
Yeah, there's some from historically when the cars used to have lead gasoline. The gasoline, the smoke from the cars will come into soils, or lead in. It could be some from soldering operations from people working on lead. That goes a lot of historic. A lot of the brownfields sites that we have in Maryland, around Baltimore City especially, and Ms. Laliker deals with that program. We address the cleanup of the lead. We have lowered our standards in soil, so now it's more stringent.
Yeah. So do you have like a map of the more contaminated areas that might have lead in soils? Do you have them identified?
No, because we do the risk assessor will go to where the child had the level, then they'll look their soils. It does obviously if their soils where they live may be the source. then we'll look into that.
Okay. And like, do you like notify, so you have a child that you identify with elevated lead levels, and you say, hey, the soil around that child's home, the neighborhood is overexposure with lead. Do you notify the neighboring families, children, or do you do outreach, or you just leave it at the child that?
At the child
testified?
level, I think. When I get to that.
Yeah, and we also notify the property owner if it's a rental property.
So the property owner, if it's a rental property, but you don't notify the community as a whole?
The environmental investigations are more specific to the household of the child. We also oversee cleanups of contaminated properties that have different types of contamination. Sometimes it's lead, and in those cases, it might be a broader cleanup.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And if I could expand, Madam Chair.
Yes, I'm passing the microphone to Senator Lamb. I have another hearing in the House. I'm so sorry. Lovely to be with you all. Thank you, Senator Ellis. And Delegate Holmes, go ahead.
One of the things that we have been doing in terms of housing is we've been doing a very good job in getting all of those homes that were pre-1978 established, and those that are going to be renting and renovating those homes pre-1978, they have to fill out certain documentation so that the owners and the tenants moving in recognize that there may be some lead in the homes, and those documents are part of the rental process and also part of the purchase process. Thank you.
Any further questions from the committee? All right, seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
I don't see anyone else signed up to testify on this bill. Seeing no one else in the audience, all right. That concludes the hearing of House Bill 1110. Next, we will move to House, I see Delegate Hill here, if she wants to come up to the witness table. We have House Bill 43. I remember this bill. This is the Maryland Sustainable Buildings Act of 2022. You'll be joined by Mr. Mark Sutherland, good to see you again, and Mr. Chris Parts. Ms. Sutherland's from Safe Skies, Maryland, and Mr. Chris Parts is from AIA, Maryland.
Thank you very much. For the record, my name is Terry Hill, and I'm coming to you with House Bill 43, which is a bill that's designed to save the state money and do good for our environment and do good for the state's economy. So that's a win-win, right? Okay, so thank you for, okay. So basically what this bill does, it would require that state buildings within budgetary constraints and as practicable, incorporate LED 55 credit, also known as bird safe designs, into the facades of either new buildings or significantly renovated buildings or buildings that we acquire. By doing that, we help to save energy because those facades, glass and plexiglass, lose a lot of energy. And by using the elements that are incorporated, that the architect community is very good at incorporating, we will save that energy and lower those costs. In addition, we save the state money because the bill also includes or asks the Department of General Services to come up with some standards for all the departments and how our buildings are managed to address lighting, particularly from dusk to dawn, and particularly in buildings that have a lot of glass, atria, and that kind of thing. So that's also part of the bird safe piece. The Maryland Green Building Council, again, will establish those along with the Department of General Services. And the shielding saves energy as well, as I said, helps to save the birds. So why is this bill necessary? In fact, why is Congress now considering SB 1920 to require all federal buildings going forward to incorporate the same things we're talking about? Number one, birds are a significant part of our economy, and they're a significant part of our environment. The estimate of Maryland's total industrial output with respect to birding and bird avian-related activities is over $900 million a year. And there are over almost 11,000 to 12,000 full-time and part-time jobs in the industry. And pre-pandemic, we're talking about 88 million in state and local tax revenue. So it's not a small thing. Obviously, birds have other benefits, including taking care of insects and pests. They also have roles to play with pollination and many other roles aside from just being wonderful to look at. So from an ecological and economic standpoint, this is really important. But I think the reason that this bill has passed with bipartisan support, not only this year, but the past several years after we amended it, again, to address the fiscal note, is because we want to save money as a state. And our buildings are more sustainable if we can lower the energy cost on them. So this bill achieves that, and it's not even a question. And I'm going to let my panel here speak to that. So again, this is not a featherbrain idea. It really is a win, 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 win for Maryland. And I ask that this year, unlike a few years ago, that you really get behind this bill, get it off the floor, and get it back in the House. Let's get this thing done. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Delegate Hill. It's great to see you. I know, right? I had a really quick House hearing.
You guys are
It was-
quick.
It was a unanimous bill, so it was kind of easy to pitch. Let's see, Mark Sutherland?
Yes,
Same
thank you.
skies. Welcome to EHE.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, Madam Chairman, and the committee, I'm Mark Sutherland. I am representing Safe Skies Maryland, which is a statewide organization focused on the conservation of birds, wildlife, and their benefits for the human community. This is a common sense bill, as Delegate Hill has very well summarized. What it does is address the growing rise of all glass buildings, majority glass buildings, which are a threat to the two most important issues affecting humankind, which are climate change and the loss of biodiversity. Specifically, for climate change, as was discussed, buildings with mostly glass are energy losers. They lose energy, they cost money to operate, they create greenhouse gas emissions, and they increase climate change. As far as diversity goes, 1 billion birds die flying into window glass every year in the United States, which is an amazing number, and one of the main reasons why we have 29% fewer birds in the United States than we did in 1970. So that's the bad news. But the good news is we have a ready-made solution. Scientists in the building industry have worked together. Scientists such as academics and American Bird Conservancy have used flight tests to determine exactly what design features and glass types birds can see. They've worked with the Green Building Council to develop LEED 55, which is the standard for our bill, and so it's ready to go. And it has been implemented already across the country. For 10 years, cities in the West, Midwest, Canada have passed this law. States of Minnesota, Illinois have passed this law. It's before the DC Senate Council right now. It's being looked at and actually used by General Services for federal buildings. So with all that, I basically want to urge the committee to pass a favorable report so that we can address climate change, reduce the loss of biodiversity, and maintain energy savings, and support the industry of bird activity, which is $9 million a year in Maryland alone. Thank you.
I heard a story on NPR about DC's bill and the number of birds that have died in DC, and that was today. So Delegate Hill, the timing was perfect. I know you arranged that. So, Mr. Parts, tell us how we're going to get this done and how the architects are going to help us with this.
Very good. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair and members of the committee. I'm Chris Parts with American Institute of Architects of Maryland, representing 2,000 architects across the state. As an architect who would be responsible for implementing this in our designs, we've assessed the regulations, tested this on building designs, and seen it implemented on some local projects. Just last week, my daughter texted me a very cute picture of 2 Canadian geese standing on a sidewalk, staring at the reflection in glass doors of a friend's dormitory. And this, for me, just kind of hit home on the highlight of perception versus physical reality. What this bill does, essentially, is influence design considerations and the ability of birds to perceive glass in flight. So essentially, why this is important, first, with very little effort, these guidelines can have a significant impact on reducing our harm to the natural environment with a new building or major renovations. Studies show that these design guidelines can reduce 90% of bird deaths when implemented on buildings. Secondly, as Delegate Hill had mentioned, the added value of diminishing operating costs with the projects, sometimes through window enhancements and certainly through operational controls of lighting. So why you should vote for it. First, for the birds. Maryland is a migratory flyway. With little effort, state-funded projects can also lead the way toward better buildings for our natural environment and guide others to follow. And then secondly, for the pocketbook. State-operated buildings will see some operational savings reduced when these designs are implemented. So AIA Maryland asks for your vote in favor of House Bill 43. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Parts. And Mr. Fredrickson, are you? Yes, good, okay. You may either, if one of you want to step back, or Mr. Fredrickson, if you're okay with taking that fourth seat, whichever is your preference. Ryan Fredrickson from the National Aquarium in Baltimore, welcome.
Yes, thank you, and it's good to be back before you all in person this afternoon. Good afternoon, Madam Vice Chair, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Ryan Fredrickson, Vice President of Government Affairs for the National Aquarium. I'm here to request your favorable report. Combating climate change and saving wildlife and habitats are two of the National Aquarium's three strategic conservation goals. This bill aligns with both goals by helping state buildings conserve energy and implement industry-recognized standards for reducing fatal bird strikes. The state of Maryland lies within a major migratory pathway for birds, putting birds at risk of colliding with man-made surfaces such as glass, often resulting in their death. It is estimated that window strikes are a leading cause of bird population decline, second only to habitat loss. In recent years, the National Aquarium has covered over 3,000 square feet of existing glass surfaces with bird-safe dot patterns. These dot patterns make the glass visible to birds and reduce the likelihood of fatally crashing into the treated glass. The good news is they work. Bird strikes at the aquarium are down 74% in the treated areas since we installed these patterns. Retrofitting existing surfaces with bird-safe patterns is not the only option to reduce bird strikes. Incorporating bird-safe practices into the building design can also be a cost-effective way to reduce bird strikes and save energy. The National Aquarium is currently in the process of replacing our iconic glass pyramid above our rainforest exhibit. And once complete, these 684 panes of glass will be frosted, bird-safe glass, which will not only prevent bird strikes, but will also increase energy efficiency within the exhibit. So our experience shows firsthand that the standards outlined in this bill are highly effective and have multiple benefits, and we respectfully urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fredericks. Senator Hester.
I was just curious if anybody could get back to me if there's like a return on the investment of installing this glass. Like I sure it's probably costs a little bit more up front, but then you get the energy savings and you save money.
Certainly the architects can speak to that, but it's basically cost neutral to design. Yep.
Well, then let's wait until you're in front of the microphone. Okay, Mr. Parts?
We've studied the cost, and we have not really, it hasn't been implemented on a project long enough to really understand, the term of the cost, and we'd have to do some modeling to that end. But 3 projects where we studied the upfront costs. One, it was 0.06% of the total project cost. Another one, it was 1/16 of 1% of the project cost, and another was 0.25% of total project cost to implement that.
Just to be clear, it sounds like the cost is a really small portion of the overall cost, but there will be energy savings.
There will be, correct.
Once we can document it.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Hester. I'm sorry, Mr. Sutherland, did you have something?
I was just going to say that an example is the Javits Center in New York, which was a big glass conference center. They wanted to make more glass and make it bigger, and they did, but they did it bird safe. They saved 20% of their energy with the new glass, as well as stopping bird kills from 696 a year to 6.
Thank you. So generally, we only have one witness respond, but thank you for that testimony. I'm amazed you don't have a sheet of paper in front of you. You've got all this data in your head. Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. And Delegate, thank you for this bill. So I'm just thinking, my brain is working, and I thought, did we pass a bill similar to this, like in 2019, that took care of the
So
birds?
there have been Senate crossfiles of this bill. Senator Lamb himself carried the bill in 2019. It crossed over, the House bill sort of crossed, but it got held up in the House, both bills, until sine die. And it's been hard to find a senator willing to carry the bill since then.
Okay. Okay, so that's why, okay, it passed the Senate, but, okay, I thought that was.
If I may, Madam Chair, the issue that I think held it up in the House at that time was the fiscal note in terms of the energy savings and some of the things. We worked with Department of General Services. We actually amended the bill in 2019 to say that the changes, particularly with respect to the lighting, had to be within budgetary constraints, and that seemed to make a difference on the House, and that and the changes also had to be practicable, so that, for instance, in a courthouse, in terms, safety is a bigger priority, so they might have to do things differently if they're building a courthouse than if they're building, a state house. And so those are the changes we made in the House that are different from the bill you had in 2019.
Great, thank you. So, listen to the testimony, I think, Aquarium, you're saying you did not get rid of glass, you just kind of treated it a certain way where the birds can see it. So we will not have buildings like this room with no windows, is that what you're saying?
At the aquarium, we have chosen to treat some of the existing glass that we have so we can retain the existing sort of architectural feel of the space. So yes, that is an option to treat existing glass.
And sunlight, a little bit of sunlight can come in.
Essentially, it's dots that you put on the glass, and they have figured out how far apart the dots need to be for the birds to see them and think, I can't fly through those dots, so they go around the glass instead.
Yeah, that's something I had to do for my late dog, Bichon Frise, because he would run into the glass door, so I had to put dots at the bottom, so
Same
that
concept.
kind of helped him. Okay, sure, understand. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator Ellis. Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, just as I've learned that flocks of birds have a leader, but it keeps changing. They take turns leading the flock. So too with this bird bill. At one point, Senator Gazone was involved from Howard County, and as many of you recall, some painful floor time for our good Senator Lamb defending the so-called bird bill. I think we all were in pain and felt our wings were a little clipped. The leadership of that flock has changed, and so we appreciate the good delegate, and so it's been handed off multiple times, and there were times there was a little gun shyness, but I think this bill is very well crafted, and looking forward to the committee taking it up.
Good. And we're not just going to wing it this time, right? If he can do it, I can do it, right? Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Salmonere, and then the former sponsor of the bill will wrap us up. Senator Salmonere.
Yeah, thank you. I just heard something you said there. So it had to be within the budgetary constraints. So if they had $1 million to do a building and then to do the bird constraints, it was 1.1 million, they could say we're not going to do it? Is that how that works?
Theoretically, but I think when they would look at the balance of what they would be saving on the energy costs, they might make a different decision. The budgetary constraints primarily had to do with the augmentation of lighting inside the building. So if we needed to use automated sensors and things, actually installing those might be a high budget cost, so they might do fewer than this bill would otherwise require, to say that we can do, so many of these, but we can't put these timers in all of our buildings right now. So that's primarily what that was directed towards.
Okay, and then the last question, you say it saves money and it's energy reduction on that. And so is this bill just for public or is it private? And if it's so beneficial, why not make it private buildings as well?
This bill is
that's the majority of where buildings are.
Right, this building is for state buildings, because if we're not going to lead with it, it's really hard to tell private industry that they need to do the same thing. Certainly in local jurisdictions, there are moves. I know Howard County has made that move. I don't know if Montgomery County has, but counties are also making the move to say that buildings coming up need to do this kind of thing.
The private ones as well?
Yes.
So you would support doing it in private buildings as well then?
I would, especially since, I mean, there were people on my committee over the years who were concerned that the glazed glass would lower the lighting inside, and it actually doesn't. It's just interesting the way light filters, that it doesn't have those kinds of health impacts that people are worried about. You're going to get the same kind of, and I guess the architect can speak towards that a little bit. Yeah.
I could say, someone mentioned before about how much of the window is covered. It's a tiny fraction of the window being covered. The light is essentially the same. It's actually more diffuse. It's softer. It's healthier for the people inside. The heat gain is less, so it's better for the people inside. So it really works in all areas as far as an improvement. And again, the overall economic benefit is always a win once you take an operation into consideration. And
Yeah, but I think what I heard is conceptually she supports it being expanded, but this bill is just about state buildings to lead by example. Is that correct, Delegate? Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay, role modeling, the best kind of role modeling. Yeah, right. Senator Lamb.
Sure, thank you. I guess I've been outed as a former sponsor of this bill by everyone on the committee. And obviously are aware of some of the provisions here. I think one part that's really key here, and I think if someone can answer this question, because the crux of this bill really hinges on the department, which is the Department of General Services, issuing standards that are consistent with LEED Pilot 55. And so can someone remind us in the most basic of terms what LEED Pilot Credit 55 actually does and says?
Sure. Essentially, it has really two parameters. Is one, the design considerations is taking a look at every elevation of the building, and you're assessing the opacity of the surfaces on every elevation of the building. So, and what you're trying to do is to get to an opacity that's going to be readily perceived by the birds. It doesn't eliminate glass, but it allows you flexibility of having higher or lower opacity, and where you choose to have more glass, that's the areas where you'll have more of the bird indicators on glass. And then essentially the second component of that is addressing, transparency and manipulating the way the glass is implemented to have indicators that the birds can perceive. And I guess then finally the third piece is the lighting controls, which is really looking at dusk to dawn lighting controls so that you're minimizing illumination of like interior atria and things like that that can be a magnet that would draw birds toward those areas.
So it's specific to the glass and then also to the lighting?
Yes, correct.
Okay. All right, well, thank you. Appreciate it. And I apologize, I was not able to cross-file. I am at my bill limit. There are probably 10 other members of this committee that would welcome the opportunity to cross-file this bill.
Hopefully we
Except
won't need
it's
it
gonna be
again.
moot. It's going to be a moot point because this is going to be the year, right,
Please.
Delegate Hill?
And may I just ask this, Madam Chair, Mr. Chair? In years past, we've actually given committee members booklets that show what these buildings can look like. They're really quite beautiful. They don't look architecturally very much different from what you imagine glass. If that would be helpful to you, we can certainly arrange that. If it's not necessary, we won't bother.
Maybe you could just do 1 or 2 copies and we can share them.
All right, thank you very
If
much.
that's easy. Thank you all for your testimony. Really appreciate your presence. Thank you, Delegate Hill, for your leadership on this and so many issues, including 911, sorry. That completes the hearing on House Bill 43. And that completes our bill hearings for today. Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Thank you, Senator Lamb, for stepping in. Let's go back to the one bill we had before us. We are second on the budget and tax bill. Let's come back to where we left off. Ms. Good. There is a House cross file, is that right? Could you give us a context of where we are on this? I'm sorry. 480, Senate bill. That's just got down to us. The Senate, the Budget and Tax Committee just voted on it in the last 36 hours. So just tell us where we are in terms of the other bill.
This mostly mimics the House bill, except the House bill only has funding for fiscal year 2022, not for fiscal year 2023. My understanding is there is every intention to go and have conference on this bill and work out the numbers and other program details.
So the House bill is only for 1 year,
Just for funds for fiscal year 2022, correct?
and this is for 2 years, correct?
Correct.
I think I had Senator Simon Air first. Then we'll work our way around Senator Washington, Senator Hester.
Just to get a little background on this, how many child care centers do we basically have in Maryland? Any idea? Maybe the sponsor would know that.
I don't have that exact number, but I knew with the first round of ARPA, there were more than 6,000 providers applied for the money in the first round. So there's got to be more than 6,000.
7,200. 4,600 family providers, 2,600 child care centers.
Okay.
Bottom of page 3 in the fiscal note.
And then the other question is, do we have any money left over from the federal funds? Is that, as you mentioned, 300 million towards that. Have we used that all up? Do we know how much is left?
No. And again, there's a difference. This is, from my understanding, with B&T Council, this is not final. The number isn't final in this bill.
Right. I'm just going to the intent of the bill. If now, you're not the lead sponsor, so maybe I can put that to the sponsor. Do you know how much balance we have left from the federal funds?
I can ask for you, but my understanding is that it's all been depleted for this specific allowance in terms of these child
So
care
the
providers.
300 million's gone. That was allocated.
So any dollars that weren't appropriated via an award was divided among the providers based on their slots.
Okay,
that
so
you- that's
they've
on the
allocated it
website.
all out already.
Yeah, so on the MSD website, I looked, and it has, how they distributed the first round, ARPA, Phase 1, and the second round. And part of what they said they did on the second round was that anything that was left over, they divided among the existing. So there shouldn't be anything left.
Okay, so last question, Senator Hester, how did you come up with this number?
The 50 million? It was negotiated, I think, with Senator King, Senator Gazzoni, and the advocates. But I do know that if you have like 7,000 applicants for the $50 million, that winds up being not a ton of money, like enough to cover like 1 month's operation, something like that. So it keeps them like in business a little bit longer.
Okay, so Senator King came up with a number, basically, working with the advocates?
I believe so, yes.
Just a question for clarification, Ms. Goodman. How much money is in the House bill?
Oh, let's see here.
The same?
I believe so.
Page 5, lines 8 through 10, say 50 years,
Okay, but for 1 year. Okay,
fiscal year 23.
okay. You had your light on, now it's not. Do you want to speak or not? Okay, so, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I realize that the Senate and House bills are in different postures. I'm looking at both right now, but in the Senate bill, page 2, lines 15 and 16, in determining award amounts, the department shall use provider capacity as a key criteria. So I've got the capacity, I'm obviously ridiculously making this up, I've got the capacity to have 50 kids, but I actually only have 2. And this current language would say that it's based on my capacity. And it looks like that was stricken in the third reader version of the House bill. And so I just want to say that out loud as we're considering our language. I think that should completely get stricken. I think that's a really ill-advised criteria. Thank you.
Yeah, it's out in the Senate bill, obviously. The whole bill is out in the Senate bill.
I'm in the Senate bill. Senate Bill 480.
Yeah.
There is no third.
Here. Budget and Tax had lead on it, and they basically struck the whole bill
Okay.
and put uncodified language in place of all the language.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I have clarity on the 50 million. So that was what the advocates requested in the governor's budget, and that's the amount that is currently there. Yes.
And then I see with the Senate version, which is it's giving money now immediately for this fiscal year. So I see that that's the difference, which I really support. People need right away. And I feel comfortable because I'm looking at both their grant round 1 and 2 and the criteria that they used. They have formulas that they use, so I'm assuming they would just apply the same thing. So I retract the need to put it in the bill, because it's clear they have a formula that they use for awarding, for awarding grants.
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, we have the bill as amended from Budget and Tax. We do know that the House and Senate bill are different. We also know informally that there is an interest in going to conference to negotiate some of this bill out. So clearly, whether it's to the chairman or Senator King or whomever on Budget and Tax, any concerns, I think, can be shared with them when they do write the conference committee report. So again, it's not to negate that we are allowed to do an amendment. So with that, the issue before us is the bill as amended. Sure.
And this probably goes to council. So the governor puts in $50 million for this program. And then I assume legislation has to spend it, or they could do it through budget, or the governor could have put a bill in to do it. How does that work? I mean, as far as process-wise?
Not her expertise. She does education policy, not funding.
I can ask
financing.
upstairs.
So it's in this budget, which is the 23 budget, right? This bill calls for some of it being spent in 22. If there are additional, as Senator Washington said, funding opportunities. And it's an emergency bill. So I think it's to get some of the money out now and then the rest in 23. I think that's one of the differences in the two bills. Senator Washington, is that your reading?
I see it giving more, I see it giving a year's appropriation sort of retroactively, so allowing them to have it now for FY '22. It looks to me in the amount of 50,000, and then in the amount provided for such purposes in the fiscal operating budget. So that is 50 million. So it's 50 million now and 50 million next year. That's how I read it.
Budget and Tax Council says the fiscal year 2022 is a deficiency, providing an additional 50 million. And then for fiscal year 2023, the budget plan includes 3.2 million for this purpose. Again, the language is not quite clear, and the part of that is they're going to go to conference to work out how to distribute.
Okay, is there further discussion on the bills amended? Okay, would anybody like to vote against our endorsement of the bills amended with the governor's appropriation? Seeing no hands going up, we'll send up a 4-6-9 to 0 to 2 vote to Budget and Tax. And again, if there are specific concerns, I seriously would have you go to Senator King or Senator Gazone or who's ever on the conference committee to make, yes, Senator.
make sure that there's a base amount that can make a difference. 3,000, 5,000 doesn't do it, so it'll be a tough thing, but I think it'd be better to really give a fewer number of providers something that's really going to last. So so I'll express that.
We're on the floor together with these same people. They're our colleagues, so we should feel not necessarily reserved and feel willing to give that feedback to them. Okay, that's what we have before us. Have a great afternoon. Thank you.